really is Putin's final throw of the dice. 99% of people in Russia do not support Putin. If he has to step down, he'll be leaving the Kremlin through an upstairs window. Elections in Russia are a little bit of an anathema or chimera. They are a mythical beast. They're not how we in the West understand elections. At the last election, Putin, I think, polled 99 or 97% of the vote. Now, one just has to read any Russian paper to realize that 99% of people in Russia do not support Putin. So I think the elections one has to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. It is not the population, it's not the rank and file in Russia who decide who the leaders are. It's the elite, it's the middle classes, it's the oligarchs. And it is certain that there is disgruntlement because there are people in the wings who would want to follow Putin. And certainly what I'm hearing through various lines is that, some of them are getting worried. Actually, what will be left if Putin keeps carrying on is going to be a broken country with a broken economy and a lot of disgruntlement around. And there is a concern that they will have nothing to take over. Conversely, of course, Putin knows that failure isn't an option. If he has to step down, he'll be leaving the Kremlin through an upstairs window, not through the front door. I mean, that is just the way things happen in Russia. So elections are opportunities for Russian disinformation and propaganda to try and spin their web. I mean, conversely, of course, we've got the midterms in America coming in November, and that might be more significant in the direction of this war, because with President Trump really treading water in the Middle East, his only option to get back on the front foot from the US electorate, who are rather losing faith with him, would be to pull a rabbit out of the hat as far as Ukraine goes, and to get a just peace deal and a ceasefire. And Trump could do that if he used he lent on Putin. And there are, perhaps suggestions that negotiations are getting a little bit closer. So I expect the elections in the US might have more of a play on how the war rolls out and how quickly it ends, and perhaps the elections in Russia. Well, certainly, the Kremlin and Putin are struggling. And the 40-day campaign has exacerbated that problem. Now, when it comes to the hybrid war, with missiles landing in Poland, with Russian ships in the English Channel, with proxies of Russia setting fire to Keir Starmer's houses. Now, that hybrid war has always been going on, and people should be in absolutely no doubt that that is happening. And in fact, that's something that the Russians are still quite good at. But after losing 1.5 million casualties on the front line, Russia really is sort of running out of manpower. Now, Putin has an absolute zero option coming up to him. He cannot replace the manpower he's losing. And the UK MOD intelligence update only 2 weeks ago said Russia was still losing over 30,000 troops per month on the front line, but only being able to replace about 30% of them. So he's got this position now, and the only way that the Russians are staying in the fight in Ukraine is through mass of soldiers, and they are prepared to, sacrifice thousands of lives just to hold on to land. So he's in a position where technologically, he of course they're firing drones and missiles, but they're running out of these things, and a lot of the missiles, hypersonic missiles and others, they're firing cost millions and millions of dollars, and we know that the Russian economy is sort of running out of money. So the manpower one is an issue that he can go to, but mass mobilization, I think a lot of people who know far more about how the Russian state works than I do are suggesting that really is Putin's final throw of the dice, and may well actually not work at all, because at the moment people are quite happy for the soldiers to go to the front line, because they actually paid a lot of money. A Russian soldier gets paid about $80,000 a year, which is twice what a British soldier gets here in the UK, which is bizarre. But because they're paid such a lot of money, a lot of Russians view them as mercenaries. But as soon as that changes and general mobilization and the middle classes in Moscow and St. Petersburg are sending their sons off to the front, then that is a very different situation. I mean, we only have to look back to Afghanistan in the 80s when Russia lost 17,000 soldiers in Afghanistan, and they were not mercenaries or conscripts. They were regular soldiers from all over Russia. The babushkas, the mothers of Russia, marched on the Kremlin and demanded Russia leave Afghanistan, and they did that. So I think something similar will likely happen if there's mass mobilization, because the wealthy in St. Petersburg and Moscow will not allow their children to go to the front line to be slaughtered as 1.5 million others, because, it sounds terrible to say it, but the majority of Russian casualties have been ethnic Russians from the east of Russia, which have sort of gone unnoticed in Moscow and St. Petersburg. But with the 40-day campaign, with the strikes in St. Petersburg and Moscow almost on a daily basis, and people seeing that the warehouses going up in smoke, refineries going up in smoke, people are suddenly realizing that Putin is not this great leader. And if he goes for mobilization, that really could be the straw that breaks the Putin's camel's back, as it were. So I think things are getting pretty desperate. And what I hope, and I'm sure everybody else who wants a just ceasefire in and a just peace deal for the Ukrainian people, is that President Trump in particular realizes this and applies pressure to the Russians to make sure that we can get a ceasefire and a just peace deal as soon as possible. But yeah, I think if Russia goes to general mobilization, Putin's days are numbered. I think Putin will keep fighting to his dying breath, because he knows that when he stops fighting, that's it. I mean, Russian leaders do not survive, and nobody thinks that Putin will be afforded a quiet, peaceful retirement in a dacha in Moscow somewhere. So Putin absolutely knows that he will either keep fighting and win, or he'll be going out of the Kremlin in a coffin. So that's without a shadow of doubt. I think when you look on, how can he keep fighting? How can he escalate? Well, I think things are. I think it's pretty difficult. I think Putin is throwing the kitchen sink at Ukraine at the moment. General mobilization, certainly, that is an option. If he can mobilize several 100,000 troops and absolutely swamp Ukraine, then there is a possibility. Again, if we're talking about probably another 1 million casualties, that they may be able to prevail, because it's not a secret that Ukraine is struggling for manpower. Ukraine is winning because they've mastered drone warfare, where you don't need so many boots on the ground. But that mass mobilization might be a way forward. It doesn't appear that he has any more conventional weaponry. Of course, there is the dreadful sort of CBRN type weaponry, chemical, biological, or nuclear. I personally believe that on the nuclear perspective, that he can't really go to a nuclear perspective. He can't fire one tactical nuclear weapon, and he knows that if that happens, then NATO would be all in. Now, whether NATO would respond with their own nuclear is a debate. Overwhelming conventional to begin with, I expect, which would probably be enough to defeat the Russian army in Ukraine. We've seen the Russians use a lot of chemical weapons in Ukraine in the fight, which have been very successful, and they use very low-grade chemical weapons. Would they go to more deadly nerve agents like sarin or Novichok? Do they have them? Possibly. Again, I think it's probably unlikely. And biological weapons, there's a great fear of biological weapons at the moment, not least with COVID and with other things that are happening around the world. Everybody will see the Ebola outbreaks. There are rumors that the Russians have a program to weaponize Ebola into some biological weapon. But again, I think that these, they just wouldn't have a strategic impact that Putin needs to save his skin. So I think, I think at the moment he's probably doing all that he can, and the only possible way out, which no doubt why he's thinking about, is a mass mobilization where he could put a few more 100,000 troops on the front line that might just tip the balance. But it's a might, and it's a possibility of hundreds of thousands more Russian dead.